Again with Diversified. I'm the presenter today, and let's go ahead and get started. We do have some folks that continue to be joining the call. So those of you that are on the call, welcome and good afternoon. This is the Diversified Control Room Best Practices webinar, and it's the first in a series of 12 that we'll be doing each month, one a month for the next year. So we encourage you to head over to our website, and we'll be posting those webinars on a monthly basis there. Our website is diversifiedus.com, so please feel free to go there. The purpose of these webinars is really to provide valuable insight and helpful information to those that we work with in the mission critical community. And we do a lot of work, Diversified does, in the mission critical community. But before we get started talking about the best practices and enhancing performance, let's go through a little housekeeping, one of which would be that joining us today are two of our senior engineers, Jason Bubness and Sean Brady, who will be participating in the call mainly towards the end with questions that may come up from attendees on this call. And that leads me to the number two housekeeping issue, and that is that if you do have a question, we encourage them. We ask that you just use the chat feature in the web application here to submit your question. We'll take a look at those towards the end and go through those so that we don't disrupt the flow of the presentation and that we can get to everything that's in the presentation today. Then I have noticed, by the way, that there are a lot of companies and customers on this call that I'm familiar with, and there are some that we're not familiar with. So if you don't mind, we'd like to just do a real quick introduction of who Diversified is, what we do, to those that may not be very familiar to that. And to that end, Diversified is more a global provider of what we would define as visualization solutions that are designed to drive performance-based outcomes for our customers. And so what that really means is that the visualization solutions that we provide, we work with broadcasters, we provide audiovisual solutions, we apply these visualization solutions to the medical community, to digital signage, electronic security, and why you're here today, the mission critical environments. And depending on that application that we might be working with, we try to not focus on the actual technology or solution itself, but we really focus on, what we would call performance-based outcomes, and that is, how do we improve workflows? How do we enhance a branding experience if it's a digital signage opportunity? Help our mission critical customers respond faster, have more situational awareness, and in a meeting environment, how would our solutions for visual platforms enhance the productivity of a meeting or a training session, for example? So everything that we do, we want to try to drive as much as possible solutions that have meaning for that business. And again, if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do visit us at our website at diversifiedus.com. So let's just get started. And what we'll do here today in getting started is let me do what I would define as an introduction to today. And let me skip through a couple little slides here that we already got to basically. But let's talk about today. I think the best place to start with the mission critical conversation of best practices is really at the end. The end conversation for today really is about, again, I mentioned a minute ago, about performance-based outcomes. What I'd like for you to walk away with today from this session is a handful of things, and that is that the mission critical work environment, no matter if you're a 911 center, a power utility control room, a security ops center, or a network operations center that manages an enterprise network, that all of these environments are pretty much the same in terms of the performance that is expected out of them. And they have a pretty hefty weight to lift and a burden to carry. And what we have found is that these environments are ecosystems. And so if you see the graphic in front of you, there are 7 things that I've highlighted that we're going to cover today, and we're just going to we're going to touch on them. We're not going to get into deep dives and all this because we do only have about 40 minutes today at this point. But we want to kind of highlight some of the things in these 7 areas that could have meaning for your business, and that if you want to know more, you can certainly go out to the marketplace and look for more information about each of these things. But it's an ecosystem. And so what does it mean, an ecosystem? It means that typically where you can drive productivity and increase the performance, if you will, of your mission critical environment is through having all of these pieces work together harmoniously. And so, what does that really mean? And in the big scheme of things, what it means is that there is science behind the technology and solutions and the way a mission critical room is designed. And if those things are out of balance, then you will ultimately feel and see the negative impact of that through the lack of performance from your staff or how you work mission critical events together. Things might not go as smoothly as you'd like for them to. And so the whole idea of this is if you can get your center to, if you can use the nuances and the science behind how to get your center to perform better, these little pieces of things that people often overlook in the design or the creation of these facilities, that can have a huge impact on your business. And so one of the first ones that we'll get to here will be collaboration. And so, collaboration for a lot of people means different things. For the purposes of the call today and what we're doing, collaboration is really going to mean, how do we use some of the technology that's out there for us to work together as teams or work together as, with this technology and solving a problem. And what we found is that there are a lot of our customers that utilize a massive amount of collaboration tools out there. And at the end of the day, they only end up with 1 or 2 that they truly use most of the time. And the others are out there, one person likes this one, another person likes that one. And so there's a lot of inefficiencies created by having multiple platforms that multiple users are using to collaborate with other workers to solve these common problems they have. So the first best practice, if you will, would be to try to standardize on fewer technology tools out there that you use to collaborate with. The second one would be make sure that what it is that you're using is easy for your employees to access and it's easy for them to use. And we've all used different tools, whether it's a web conferencing tool like we have today, or is it, a lot of architects use CAD systems that they collaborate with other designers on. So there are a lot of different tools out there, but select a tool that's easy for most people to use and isn't, a learning curve every time you have to go into it and remember what you have to click to make it do this and that. So, ease of use and easy to access would be another way to improve collaboration. A third way would be leverage the benefits of a common operating picture. And as you can see in this particular photograph that we have of a project that we did, in the background you see a massive video wall. Well, that's what is commonly known as a common operating picture. But a common operating picture isn't necessarily just the video wall. In most cases it is, but the common operating picture is just a place or a variety of places that are accessible for people to view, whether it's at your desktop or individual monitors or a video wall, where you can place the content that's relevant to the people that are there working their daily shift or that they're working and trying to mitigate the risks associated with a crisis that's going on. So the common operating platform is that place where you can throw all your information up there that come from disparate sources, and everybody can see it, so that everybody from where they are can collaborate on the same information. Nobody's looking at one thing, so one person not looking at one thing, another person looking at another. And the other is that, I kind of go back to old school. If you go back to basics, from a collaboration perspective, you don't rely on the technology alone. A lot of collaboration happens with the human-to-human interaction. And I like to promote that in the designs that I do for my customers and that we as a company do is, use technology where you can and for what its best purpose is, but don't rule out the fact that there's a human element of people working together that really does create and facilitate, solving problems faster and making better decisions. And the other way that collaboration works really well is to develop work groups. And I know a lot of my customers have started to employ this philosophy, and that is where you might have 2, 3, or 4 people that are all working. I'll give you an example of this, is that an airline customer that we did a large project with, that they occupied an entire floor of a high-rise building and had 350 people on that floor working together. And they were split up into work groups, and the work groups were based on the equipment, and the equipment to them is a plane. So they might have had, and I don't remember the exact number, about a dozen different types of aircraft, and each aircraft had uniquenesses to it about what the requirements are for that aircraft to get from point A to point B. And so they split their teams up into these work groups based on the equipment. So a 737 piece of equipment might have 16 or 20 people or 30 people in that work group that are all specialists in that one area, and it really helped to facilitate the collaboration between these people when they had issues and problems to solve. So, again, collaboration is not just about technology, it's about the human-to-human interface. And recapping on this particular topic, I would standardize on fewer platforms and make sure that they're very easy to use. So as we move to the second topic of our discussion today, in terms of, how do I increase the performance of my staff? How do I make sure that, when they're working in the optimal environments? Sightlines come into question. And so a lot of people don't really know what sightlines are. Some people do. And for those of you that really don't know sightlines in the control room or mission critical environment where you're working with video walls or displays that are mounted on the walls, as well as the monitors at your control room console furniture, sightlines are just what you see here in this picture. There are a lot of human factors and ergonomics that are associated with the science behind what makes a person more effective based on where they're sitting in the room and how they do their jobs. And so for sightlines, I would say, consult a subject matter expert in the area of human factors and ergonomics, and there are some out there. You could just go to the internet and find those kind of folks to work with. But from a general perspective, if you're at the 50,000-foot view about, how can I employ some best practices with sightlines, one of the things that I find that a lot of my customers miss when they're either designing a new facility or, let's say, for example, implementing a video wall solution in their command center, and maybe they're working with an architect, maybe not, is that where you're sitting at the command console with a monitor in front of you, there is a distance between the floor and the top of the monitor at that console. And then there's a difference between the floor and the bottom of the sill height or the video wall where it starts. And what's missed a lot is that the ceiling height in your room will drive a lot about the size of the video wall solution that you can put in there, where you can still have optimal viewing of the bottom of the video wall screens over the tops of the desktop monitors and not cut off the bottom section of that video wall. And some rooms, they're just unforgiving. You can't work with them. They've got barely an 8-foot ceiling in there. Maybe it's an older building, although most corporate facilities have 9-foot ceilings. but I have been in rooms where the ceiling's been modified in the past and it's just not optimal. Sometimes you just can't work around it. You just don't have the choice but to do what you have to do, and you're going to have to live with, this is what I have to work with, and so, I'm going to move forward. But if you have any opportunity to work with adjusting ceiling heights in a room, selecting a room that has taller ceilings, etc., then know that ceiling height will drive what size video wall, and what that means is that determines what the bottom of the video wall panels will be off the finished floor, that allows your operator to see over the tops of the monitor to be able to see that video wall screen. So a lot of coordination here in the sight lines, but I see it all the time where the customers that we work with and the architects overlook this simple thing, but it can have a huge impact on what you do. It may have an impact on the console furniture that you select. It could have an impact on the way the room is laid out. And so keep that in mind as you start to, if you're redesigning or building a new facility, that's something that you really need to kind of work out and work through as you're looking at how you're laying the floor out, what walls you want to put a video wall on, how tall the ceilings are, etc. So that's the second concept. These aren't in any order of priority, by the way, because this is an ecosystem, and all of this is important. So if it seems like maybe these are a little out of order, it doesn't matter what order they're presented in. What matters is that you take the concept behind each one of them and kind of digest it and see if you can put it to practice in your particular mission-critical environment. This one speaks volumes to me, and it is probably one of the most overlooked aspects of how to get more performance out of the staff that work in the operations centers. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a 911 facility, security operations, a data center. If you had any type of 24/7 facility, the seating, the chairs that your folks sit in is huge, and it doesn't seem that way. I see a lot of standard office furniture seating because somebody didn't want to pay a little extra money to have performance-oriented 24/7 rated ergonomic seating. But let me tell you, if you can go look on the internet, there are studies after studies after studies that have been performed about the impact of seating and what the impact is that it has on that worker. And it's not just in the mission-critical environment. It just seems to be magnified in that environment because of the type of work that we do in those rooms. This is also can have effect on the general population of the office workers. You sit at your desk. The fewer adjustments you have on your seating, the less likely you are to be comfortable, and obviously it's sort of downhill from there. But if you look at this graphic here, some of the things that you should really keep in mind when it relates to seating and the performance of seating is that seating and chairs can be constructed of a variety of different types of materials and with different intents. And so I would say if you can find an office chair that fits your needs, that has multiple adjustments on it, is built of quality materials, metals and steel, and very substantial foam backing in it and cushioning, then maybe that's a good solution for you. But I would highly suggest in the 24/7 work environment, look at a couple of different providers out there that specialize in this type of stuff. And I'm not here to promote certain businesses, but I am here to promote companies that adhere to best practices in helping their customers perform the types of outcomes that they want to see too. And that is, how do I get more out of the people that work there and make them more comfortable, make their jobs better? And, towards the end of this session, I'll let you know a little more about that. But when you're looking at seating, again, I think the key is having multiple adjustment points, and each of those adjustment points having multiple options and levels of adjustment. So not only does the the chair tilt back, it doesn't just tilt one or two notches or angles. You should have several different options for how that chair tilts back. Same with the height adjustment or the adjustment of the armrests and the angles of the armrests. Lumbar support's very important. That's an old school, benefit that a lot of chairs have. You have them in your car today. You've had them in the cars for years, but the not so obvious features here are things like, the armrest adjustments and how comfortable is that for the worker that's sitting there for several hours at their desk, monitoring, situational awareness. Again, there's a lot of science behind the chair that somebody sits in, and many of you may, already have performance-based seating and know the benefits of this, but if you don't, take a little time. Go do a little research and search it out. And, from a price perspective, you might pay 25 or 30% more for something that would provide you with 100% more return on that investment with that employee being more comfortable and able to work better. So as we move on to the next aspect of our session today, console furniture in many ways is a lot like the performance seating. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of ergonomics and human factor issues that are associated with properly designed command consoles, as they're called. Some are called control room consoles or console furniture. They go by a variety of different names. But some of the things that you need to look out for, much like the seating aspect of a control room, is all the little nuances that make that operator, that person that works there that's monitoring situational awareness or helping solve problems for your business. And it's the center point of that organization's operation is, how do I enhance the experience that worker has in the way they perform their job? And so what does that mean at the workspace itself? Your workstation, some people call it. It's one size doesn't fit all. Today, most console solutions that you would go look at have a lot of variety of ability to be adjusted and constructed the way you need them to be constructed. So some of the things you'd want to look out for in this particular graphic, make sure your consoles have bullnose edging on the edges. And why would you want that? There's a comfort level with, you rest your arms on the edge of that work surface to work on your keyboard, your laptop. And over a period of time, that if that's not a smooth transition and it's not a softer transition than a hard edge, sharp edge of a normal, cubicle desk, for example, then that's going to wear on your forearm. And you just sit there for a few minutes and do that, and you're going to have lines across your arm, marks where you've had your arm on that work surface. So that's a really important factor from a comfort. How does somebody, how do you, just these little tiny things that make somebody a little bit more productive. Sit-stand features have become very popular today, where it allows the worker to stand up for a period of time, stretch their legs, continue to work, do the monitoring that they're there to do, or solve problems for the business. And then when they're finished, they can, lower the work surface and sit down. Well, there are some downsides to sit-stand, believe it or not, although, from a health perspective and keep your employees alert and, kind of refreshed, it has great benefit. But one of the mistakes that I see often in the design of a room is that if you have 2 or 3 rows of consoles and these rows all have sit-stand features and you have a video wall in front of the room, what happens when that front row stands up to stretch their legs? Well, obviously they're blocking the video wall, so there goes your situational awareness. So I point that out because, believe it or not, it's not just once I've seen that. It's quite a few times I've seen that hasn't been thought through about looking at the bigger picture of the ecosystem that we are working in and we're focusing on just what that console can provide to that worker. So there's a balance between trying to take care of our staff and make it comfortable and more productive for them to work at their workspace, and the balance between, you know, all the other things that are in the room that have to work together to provide this environment that they work in. The materials that are used, I see pretty frequently some kind of low-end wood products out in the marketplace that, you know, they're maybe inexpensive, but they're just not going to last. And in a 24/7 work environment, consoles get abused. You have 3 shifts of 8 hours apiece, and different size people, men, women, you know, tall, not so tall, etc. And you know, these people, you know, are going to sit there and do different things. It's going to get its workout, right? So you need to make sure that the materials that are used are durable materials, and that the consoles that you decide to select are going to last a long time. Because, you know, there's that old saying, you get what you pay for. It is nowhere more obvious to me than with consoles that's a great place to start in getting value, is looking at the longevity of how long will I keep these consoles. You know, I'm going to have a lot of different people here using these things, and it's going to get kind of abused. The other aspect of consoles that I'd like to point out is also modularity, and the ability that if a piece of the console gets damaged somehow, that it can easily be replaced. And most console manufacturers today have that ability and design their furniture such that can happen. So again, just some pointers for console furniture as you move forward with any renovations you may do, or if you're upgrading your furniture, you've had it for a while, and you know, so forth. As we continue here, we're going to talk about the common operating picture, which we talked about a little earlier, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about the common operating picture. And what that's going to do for us here in our session today is, after this particular aspect of the ecosystem and you know, how does this impact the performance of my staff and my overall operations center, is we're going to talk a little bit about advances in software and how that, you know, ties into the common operating picture. But to me, the common operating picture is just a great piece of real estate, a video wall, or even independent large screen 4K monitors, for example, to aggregate all the disparate data that you have and put it in a single place. And so what is that going to do for you? It's going to help you increase the situational awareness. It's going to get everybody on the same page and connect the dots. And it facilitates the collaboration. We spoke about that earlier. We just finished talking about sightlines, and so what I'll point out again is that if you do use video wall technologies, or you're upgrading your current system, building a new facility, is be very careful with making sure you understand what the appropriate size video wall is that can go in that facility, and so that you can maximize its benefits and not cut off the bottom of the screen because of, you know, obstructions that might be in the way. So that's where we talked about sightlines earlier in our conversation here. Viewing distances kind of tie into sightlines. Viewing distances are really the distance, the optimal distance, if you will, of where somebody sits in the room, front row, second row, etc., versus where the actual display screen is. And so there's rule of thumb for how close should somebody be versus how far should they be from the screens. And a lot of times the room that you're working in, or you're trying to design with your architect, you may have limits on what you can do there just because of space planning, or you have a room that you've been given this room and you can't change it, and it's, you know, so many square feet, and the ceilings are so tall, and you can't change any of that. And so viewing distances, really, at the end of the day, I think if you have an opportunity to work with designing the layout of the room and how far somebody sits and how close they sit, it comes down to what is the content on the screen that you're going to be viewing. So what do I mean by that? Well, the content could be live video. If you're a security operations center, then you're going to be showing a lot of live security camera feeds in there. And in that environment, you really don't need to be very close to the video wall screens to be able to see what's going on. Video is a lot more forgiving than raw text and data. It's larger, it's easier to see at further distances. Versus you're working with some very detailed software. There's some examples here on this particular photograph of maps and a lot of detail. Well, in this particular project that we did for the Polk County Sheriff's Department in Florida, there was no real need for them to be able to read the data that's on this screen. Most of the use of this screen was really just providing a high-level overview of the common operating picture and situational awareness, and most of the decisions were made at the desktop level. But there are a lot of mission-critical environments that we work in that they do need to use that video wall or the monitors they're using on the wall for the common operating picture for their work. And if that's the case, then it's really down to what is the size of the font, the color of the graphics, the type of graphics. Are they large, colorful graphics, or is there a lot of detail, as in finer maps, for example? So there's no real right answer, is my point, for what the correct viewing distance is for your operators. I say that you need to have a discussion with yourself and your architect or your team and look at the content that you have and draw some relevance from that. So with the common operating picture, again, you have a lot of choices as to how you do this, whether you do it with video wall technology or standalone large screen or large format 4K monitors. That's becoming very popular, and but it can provide you with some great situational awareness. As I mentioned a minute ago, the common operating picture, a great segue into this next topic of software, is, you know, there have been so many advances in software in the mission critical world, and it's different depending on what your environment is. Your environment's a 911, so the software you use in a 911 center would be very different than the software you might use in a network operations center for an enterprise, for example, or in a data center. I mean, in the data center and an enterprise, if you're managing and monitoring the networks, then you want software that's going to help trigger, you know, virus detection, you know, intrusion detection, you know, all the spamming, and also what monitors, helps you to monitor the appliances and devices that you have on the network and the network itself. Whereas the 911 center, software that you're going to use there is going to typically be your computer-aided dispatch, your AVL. They use a lot of GIS mapping software, news and weather feeds, etc. So, you know, again, there's a lot of different types of software, but there is something that's very common to all of these different applications as it relates to best practices and how do I get more performance out of the space I use for my operations center and the folks that work there. And what's changed is everybody's heard of big data, and big data has been around a while. And what is happening, though, is over the last several years, a lot of companies have started to develop software or enhance the software that they already have to pull in the big data and do analytics on the big data, as well as correlation of the big data, so that it can provide what we define as predictive behaviors and automation of processes. And that's where you get the bang for the buck in terms of best practices with software. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here in many ways. And for those of you that aren't that familiar, I would really encourage you, from a best practices in your mission critical facility, is you know, look at the software tools that you're using and ask the question, to what degree can I leverage data analytics and data correlation in these tools that I'm using, or that I can go out and reach into the existing systems that I have to import features and functions and information that allow me to have predictive behaviors. And what that really means is that, you know, if you can help to mitigate or even eliminate, you will never eliminate it, I mean, but if you can offset some of the errors that are made by us humans when we're sitting in a control room, and they're made, we're human, right? There's nothing that's going to ever stop us from making mistakes and errors. But if you can help to mitigate that and reduce how many errors are made through human judgment and have processes automated that may not be automated today that make it easier and more effective for you, I assure you, you will see some huge gains in the way that your center operates. It's amazing what is going on in the software world with the ability to correlate all this data and have it make sense, whereas in the past, it was all disparate in different locations and was very difficult to work with. And so, and one last thing on this, a lot of the information used in mission critical environments today has the ability to do overlays. So if you're using a GIS or a Google map, for example, you have the ability to do multiple layers of data over the same map and turn these layers on and off. So, you know, if it's an example where you're trying to track weather, then you are able to switch on and off the layers between, you know, the heat map, the thunderstorm map, the lightning strikes, you know, where the winds are coming from, the wind patterns. You know, there's a whole host of things that you're able to do today with this information. So anyway, as we kind of wrap up that software piece of it, and we're actually getting close to being at 40 minutes here, and time does fly. I'd like to spend a few minutes on lighting. Lighting is really important, as is the seating, as is sightlines, the collaboration, common operating picture software, everything that we've talked about. And one of the things that I found with the lighting aspect of if you're building a new control room, if you're just trying to enhance it, renovate your existing facility, is a couple things. One, like all of the things I've already talked about, there's a science behind how I get performance out of my center using lighting appropriately. Most of the centers we go into are using traditional fluorescent or incandescent lighting, and at best they have it zoned in a couple of different zones, so they have some level of control dimmability of that lighting, and that's fine if that's what you have to work with. But if you have a choice, if you have the ability to do more, I would suggest that you know, as a best practice, look into more about how lighting affects the human condition in that room. And a lot of people think that maybe this is a little over the top and silly. It's really not. Lighting has been proven time and time again. Just go look for yourself on the internet. There are studies, hundreds of them, about how lighting and colors affect human performance. It can cause depression if it's not set up correctly. It causes stress and fatigue, irritability, and the list goes on. It is amazing the negative impact lighting can have if it's not set up correctly. And to set it up correctly is not a huge undertaking. It's not a science project and hugely expensive. It will add a little cost to your project, but I think the cost that you would put out is, you know, a lot less than the benefits that you will get. Today, we're using a lot of LED lighting that emulates daylight, and this LED lighting can be adjusted. And so if you have the ability to look into replacing your fixtures with LED, you know, I would look into that further as a best practice to see how you can utilize that. Again, I mentioned zoning a few minutes ago. Zoning is very important to make sure that you have control over certain areas of your room or your facility. And one of the things that I encourage my customers to do is to utilize control systems that allow you to, like a Lutron-oriented product, that allow you to customize and automate in many ways, the lighting feature. So when there is a crisis or a problem you're trying to solve and it's all hands on deck, you would want the lighting in the room to not be subdued and muted and create this Starbucks kind of casual theme of a place to work, right? You're going to want to have the lights on and people paying attention and people focused and situational awareness at its highest. And there are ways that you can automate, the lighting controls in your room to accommodate that. And then once the crisis or the situation has passed or is about to pass, you can have the lighting adjust itself back down to more of a typical daily operations that's not as bright and intense as it might be when, all hands are on deck. The lighting, again, I'm kind of going back to what we've already said. It is a very big part of the human performance factors that are associated with well-designed and well-built control rooms. And as we close up the webinar here, now approaching 45 minutes, and being respectful of your time, I do want to just sort of say as a recap that, look at the control room or your mission critical environment, not as, just people sitting at consoles or just the video wall, and these are all separate things that you have to deal with. You look at how they all work together to create more harmony and produce a much more productive work environment. I'd say look beyond the obvious things and kind of just do a little homework and try to employ some of the nuances and the details, because that's where you'll get the dividends. That will yield a lot for you. I'd ask a lot of questions, and I'd ask them early in your project so that you're not way down the road and you kind of have that aha moment and go like, oh, I wish I'd known that 3 months ago. So ask a lot of questions and do that early in the project. And of course, as you would with any kind of specialty project that you have, seek the guidance and the advice of subject matter experts. There are a lot of subject matter experts in the marketplace out there today that specialize in mission critical environments, and certainly we're one of them. But I would definitely search out that expertise for that project that you might have. And let me just, as we're closing out, before we get to any questions, mention that early on in the webinar, I did mention that we have one every month coming up. The next one will be in September on the 19th, and we're going to get into a lot more detail, a deeper dive about actionable intelligence, which plays back to the software topic I spoke about a few minutes ago. And we're going to talk to some subject matter experts in that field that deal with what I would call performance enhancing tools that automate processes, they improve response times, they enhance decision making and reduce human error. And how these things either stand alone or integrate with other platforms that will be out there. So if this is a topic of interest to you, jot that date down and go visit us at our website. It's posted on the website, and you'll be able to register there. So with that, we kind of wrap things up. I did provide here my my contact information if you want to jot that down. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to respond to an email or take a phone call about what we talked about today or other topics around this. And kind of with that, I'll look to see if we have any questions that may have come in from the panelists.
Robert, we did have a question regarding the chair, and I think Jason and Sean are prepared to respond to that one.
Okay, go ahead.
I believe someone asked what chair it was that you had shown in the slide presentation, and it is an Iron Horse Series 3000 chair, executive, with the chrome base, the foldable armrests, and a bunch of other features that they offer on their chairs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And and again, we're not here to necessarily promote particular manufacturers, but certainly those that employ best in class solutions. Human Scale also has a chair called the Freedom Chair, and I think that runs about maybe $900 to $1,000 range for a chair like that. But let me tell you, you sit in those things, it's well worth it. It's almost like sitting in a Ferrari. It's just very comfortable. You'll see a difference. I've got a question here that was asked that says, what are some of the trends that we're seeing in these control room environments? And so it depends on, so the answer to that is it depends on what aspect of the control room or the mission critical environment we're talking about. So there are different trends that are taking place with video walls, with consoles, with the actual design of the room, with lighting. All of them have their own separate trends that are going on. I would say, because I could take 10 or 15 minutes to answer that question, but in general, I think that some of the trends I see that are really not performance-based, are really more wow factor and aesthetic, are really deterring from the performance of facilities, where I see a lot of users and a lot of companies and architects, when they're designing these rooms, think that a control room has to be this sort of dark environment, sort of secretive and clandestine, and they don't have to be. And maybe if you're in dark ops for the government that you want that, but I'm not even sure I'd suggest it there. The best type of environment is, again, where you can have some control of the lighting, have lighting in a room that would allow your staff to do their jobs effectively, to create a mood that is representative of engaging and being alert, and not have these dark rooms where there's a lot of contrast between the light that they're working with around their work desk and the background, which they can barely see the person 25 feet away on the other side of the room. So that's a trend that I'm seeing. I'm also seeing trends where people are incorporating different colored lights in a room, and there are studies that show that these different color lights can affect the mood in the room. I'm not sure, I'm not a subject matter expert in lighting alone, but I'm not sure I buy into that 100%. Sometimes you see blue lights and red lights, or rooms that are lit up blue and red. Maybe in certain circumstances that can affect the human condition. I would say if you're interested in something like that, I would go do some research or hire a lighting expert at that, a consultant. But for the most part, I would stay away from that trend. I would stick with what would be the best practices that I've been describing over the course of this webinar today. Lisa, did you have any other questions that came up?
Not that I'm seeing right away, but maybe Sean and Jason have access to that. It looks like there's some information in the Q&A window that I just can't access. I'm sorry.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Jason, Sean, do you have anything?
So Paul Schultz had made a statement about with regards to lighting in the control room, stating that when designing lighting in a control, you need to be cognizant of the quality and quantity of light and how that's applied to a control room space versus an office space, if you would, if I understand that correctly. And it was more of a statement than a question, and he's correct in that. And there's a lot more, obviously, than we're going to cover in a presentation like this regarding the lighting design, but suffice to say, I think it's pointed out that it's one of the critical aspects of the control room environment that needs to be created to create the best environment for for your control room to be.
Oh, absolutely.
A better word.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Sean. So yeah, that was a great comment that was made, and who made that?
Paul Schultz made that comment, and something else to point out as well. When talking about the performance seating, one of the things that you should be concerned with as well is the setup of the chairs. There are so many options and different setups for a chair. Setting a chair up is really to be set for an operator themselves. Sometimes you have the ability to have personalized chairs, and if you don't, they can still be set up, and a training should be given on how to use the chairs. That way everyone has knowledge of the correct way to set it up for themselves, because without the proper setup, you're not going to get the full benefit of buying a high-dollar chair like a 24/7 control room chair. So be cognizant of that. If you're purchasing seating, that you also get some training included with that.
Yeah, that's a great point right there. So, going back to the lighting, Jason had mentioned there's a lot more that could go into that. And there is. If you really wanted to spend the time to tweak your room and have lighting become a very important part and an influencing factor on your staff, I mean, you could look at color temperatures, you can look at the kelvins, you can look at, lumen outputs, you can look at all sorts of different fixtures. And I mean, the list goes on with everything that you can do with lighting. That the science behind it and the physics behind lighting is unbelievable. But that's a totally separate conversation that could take a long time. And maybe we do one of these webinars specifically on lighting at some point in the future. But yeah, and if anybody on this call today, as we're kind of wrapping up, has suggestions of a topic that's close to your heart, important to you, you'd love to hear us do a session on, we welcome the input. So kind of with that, let's see here. Any other last
more questions?
Oh, let's keep going then.
Hey,
let's keep going.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to see them in the Q&A box. It's a little hard to maneuver today. Excuse me, but we've got a question about which software do we recommend as the best to use in a NOC or a SOC environment? Okay,
that's a really broad question, and the best way to answer that is, depending on what it is, the requirement. So if it's in the NOC environment that's related to network management, et cetera, I wouldn't be in a position to recommend a particular product for network operations, monitoring the health of the network devices, appliances, or any type of intrusion detection or cybersecurity threat management. I would say there's so many out there, and there's so many good tools out there. Then you could talk about the video wall solution, that helps you aggregate everything together. I will say this, there is a product in the marketplace, and again, I said I wasn't in the position, but I kind of rethought that. There's one product in the marketplace that kind of is a combination of a lot of products put together that's really robust, that's starting to do a lot, and it's called Sitscape, SITSCAPE. And that is a tool that is really more of an analytics and correlation tool, but it has the ability with its analytics engine to tie into a lot of different back-end systems to provide you with big data correlation and the correlation of key data sets to draw conclusions about things that might be going on, trigger alarms, alerts. So if you have devices out there and SNMP traps in them that allow you to go in and tie into that through the API, then Sitscape could be a good one for you to look at. Happy to explore that in a little more detail. If whoever asked that question wants to email me or give me a phone call, could take that offline.
There's also a question from Stuart Reynolds that he'd like to see included some ADA requirements for both consoles and raised flooring, general room circulations, and things like that. And Stuart, those with ADA requirements, there are a lot of specific conditions that will go into what the compliance is, specifically around doors and things like that. But in general, for control room walk paths and circulation, between consoles and things like that, you would probably want to maintain 3 feet of clearance between console to console, and primary thoroughfares, such as wider openings that you're trying to have more directed traffic flow, maybe keep those to around 4 foot. But it depends on really the layout of the room, how much space you have, and how we could help you optimize the layout of your space. So those are some general requirements, but specific conditions will also play into account for how every control room is set up, because they're all a little bit different, but those are some ADA guidelines that you can hang your hat on. And as far as the raised flooring goes, again, it depends on what you're requiring to run underneath your raised floor, whether there's ventilation, whether there's wiring, whether there's plumbing, that sort of thing. But one guideline for raised flooring is that for every 1 foot of raise, you need 12 inches of ramp. So one inch of raise, 1 foot of ramp is something to kind of keep in mind there.
These are great questions, by the way. Thank you for putting them out there. Did you say that there were a couple that had come in? Was there another question?
Yeah, there are a few. Asking about what format is recommended to accommodate 2 team members per shift in a knock room. And we've also got a great comment here that says that someone had recently upgraded their lighting and had great praise from their controllers with less fatigue and positive energy levels. So just great reinforcement there.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome. Well, it's important. Yeah, it's important. I'm not sure that question that you had about the format, I'm not sure what that means, the format for two operators in their control room.
Okay.
I'm not sure what they mean by format, if it's room layout or the type of consoles, how to configure the console. So maybe if they are still online and want to kind of maybe reword that, resubmit it, I'd be happy to answer that. I'm just not sure how to.
Okay, and maybe just refer to the rcameron@diversifiedus.com. I see that it is coming up on the hour, and again, we just want to respect their time.
Absolutely. Yep. So we went a little bit over, but that's okay. I like it. So do you have any more that we could take? Maybe one more question?
Jason, Sean, are you seeing anything else?
This one on kind of elaborated on his earlier question about the software
Great.
he was looking at, and it was he's looking at fault management software in a knock room. His is also the question to accommodate 2 team members per shift in a knock room. Fault management, it really depends on the organization. Several of the knocks that we've done in the past few years have seemed to be using SolarWinds as their fault management aggregator of problems that they're seeing across their network, both from the equipment and the network stability itself. That seems to be a real popular one. I don't know if it's the best, but it's certainly the one that is the software du jour these days. And to elaborate on to accommodate 2 team members per shift in a knock room, again, that's probably it's a little on the vague side for a control room or even a knock, where it really depends on how the operation is run. Where most you can segregate operations into a utility control room, a knock, a TCC, and they're all batting at the same pinata, but they're all going about it in a different way. So it really depends on how the organization functions to probably better answer some of the questions of what's best. There's probably no one what's best for this particular type of operation, regardless of what the question is. But we try to tailor those answers to what exactly it is that operation either does or they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and when it comes to space planning, one of the ways that we typically set up a room is, again, as Robert mentioned, we look at a lot of the science as far as what's required. So we'll start with a workspace, one console, look at the monitors that are required for the console, build the console around the size monitors and the amount of monitors you need. That's how you figure out the desk. ADA compliance between desk to desk, and then visual distance from your seated position to your common operating platform. And that's kind of how the room starts to take shape. But as Robert mentioned, there's a lot of science behind that, and we'd be happy to engage you a little further to give you any assistance that you need with setting up your workspace.
Yeah, Robert, I'm just seeing some nice thank yous, and I guess we're going to do some email follow-up is what I'm reading here. But that's all that I see in the Q&A right now.
Okay. Well, great. Well, look, let's close it out, and everybody has our contact information if they want to reach out individually. I will leave with this: we're in business to sell solutions and help our customers. There's just no question about that. I'd be lying to you if I sat here and said we're not. But the purpose of this is to help educate those that we work with and customers we haven't had the opportunity to work with. And if there's a question or there's a challenge that you're facing, I don't want you to think you call and reach out to us, you're going to have a sales guy, just breathing down your neck all the time trying to get an order from you. That's just not how we work. We want to help you out. We want to try to work with you the best we can, and that may not result in an order. But we're looking for long-term customers. I'm not looking for a quick hit on an order. So don't hesitate. Don't be shy. Reach out to us. Let's see if we can help you out in some way. And that's how we've won customers in the past. So with that, I want to thank Jason and Lisa, you and Sean, and all of you that have attended, still on. There's still quite a few of everybody on. Most of the time we drop a lot, but we've still got quite a few. Thank you guys for joining, and please do visit the website so that you can see what's coming up next month and each month thereafter.
Have a good rest of your afternoon, everybody.